Hello, yes, my name is Chris Grundemann. I work as the principal architect for networking at Myriad Supply, and we're going to talk a little bit about whether or not we're all going to be replaced by scripts. So just a little background, I think the impetus of this slide, I think the first thing to recognize is that experts are a lot like hipsters. Anyone who tells you they are one probably isn't. But I have talked to a lot of network engineers over a lot of countries, over a lot of cities, over a lot of years. And so I draw on that, and really this is the beginning of a conversation, I think. I don't think this is a definitive answer to anything, but hopefully some food for thought. So, will we be replaced by scripts? Right? Let's discuss. A short answer is no. A slightly longer answer is yes. And probably the more accurate answer is maybe. So I think it's probably best to start over and really figure out what we're talking about here. Why are we talking about this at all? Why does this question come up? Why does that question even make sense to you right now? Who are we talking about? Who's going to be replaced, or at least in this specific context? And then what might that future hold? And then what can we do about it? So obviously the first question there is why are we talking about this? I'm going to read this definition: a program that automates the execution of tasks that could alternatively be executed one by a human operator. That's a script. That's what we're talking about. But why are we talking about it? I think that's in the context of this idea of SDN, of software-defined networks. Of course, if you ask what SDN is to 10 people, you're probably going to get at least 12 answers, especially if they're experts. Maybe it'll be 14 or 15. And there's this question of, is OpenFlow the purest of SDN, or is overlay the answer? And really, I think a lot of this comes down to intent-based networking, and how do we put, move away from the CLI and just tell the network what we want it to do and have it do that, which really means a layer of abstraction from the network. Right, so you're building abstractions on, which was really kind of simplifying things. And so maybe at its simplest level, it's a bunch of scripts. Right? I think the real thing here that's important is a trend towards automation. And to me, automation means two things. It means putting information into the network and getting information out of the network in the most efficient way possible. Humans are prone to mistakes, and also worse than mistakes, right? Intentional misuse of things. So if you can put some layers of abstraction there where that's taken care of with a policy layer, maybe that's better. Maybe you can get it towards autonomous networks. If you actually have information coming out and information going in, there's maybe a cycle. And also I think one of the biggest pieces behind all of this, the move towards automation, is that we know that the world's changing. And so in that, agility becomes king. And if you have to log into 150 or 1,500 or 15,000 devices to make a change, your business is not going to be very agile. So automation, right? It's a current boogeyman. The robots are coming. They're going to take all our jobs. And then, more specifically to our environment, you can pry the CLI from my cold dead hands. What's an API? And I'm not a programmer, and I don't want to be. So I think we're seeing this automation trend play out across industries, but also within our own. And that's why I think when I ask, are we going to be replaced by scripts? You know what I'm talking about. I think it's worth taking a step back from that a little bit, because we talk about automation as replacing us, as making things simpler or easing jobs and things like that. There's a quote here: make things as simple as possible, but not simpler. And that ties to me into this abstraction idea. And so yes, abstraction does make things seem simpler. But closing your eyes doesn't make the world go away. And abstracting away from complexity doesn't mean the complexity is not there. So, maybe in the back of your mind, think about who still has to be there to understand that complexity in order for these abstractions to work. In order for someone to have the easy button, someone else probably has to be behind the scenes making it all work. So with that, I want to jump in really quickly to just specifically here, who am I talking about being automated away, right? One group of us is internal IT, the corporate network, the folks who are actually making things work so that the CEO's Wi-Fi works when he's taking a dump, or so that the corporate website stays up, right? Usually we're generalists and really operations focused. Then there's data centers, and by this I mean not necessarily just the corporate data center, but more public facing, so cloud service providers, things like that, where you've got a dedicated network staff, there's more specialized functions. And that rolls up even to service providers, meaning ISPs and NSPs, where networking is the company's focus. And so of course you have highly specialized functions. There's striations of network engineers within there, and those people are all included in this. And then of course the consultants, which focus on kind of all the layers: design, implement, and troubleshoot. And if there's other network engineers, if there's other folks working on networking that I missed, I'd love to hear about it. I think that kind of covers most of the bases, but we're really happy to hear about other networking jobs that maybe I'm not aware of. So with that concept of why we're talking about scripts and who we're talking about them replacing, I'd like to dig into a little bit about what I think the future looks like from where we're standing today anyway. And I think in order to do that, instead of thinking about those different layers of, whether you work in corporate IT or a data center or a service provider or you're a big WAN backbone, I think the horizontal layers of architecture, engineering, operations, provisioning, and the help desk are probably the better way to look at this. So from the architecture layer, right, does design still matter? Does somebody still have to design these networks? And I think one of the key pieces here is that humans innovate. I don't think it's going to be possible for a computer to come up with a new product based on your network or based on your IT infrastructure, at least not in the very near future. Right, and finding the efficiencies, right, using the right scripts in the right places, figuring out how to apply these things, figuring out how to put it all together, understanding the system as a whole. So maybe you have scripts or automation, in certain pieces or certain parts, but how do you tie that all together? And then really you're looking at, how do we sell this, the products, the services, the business drivers behind this. Someone has to understand all of that. So I think the impact to network architecture is probably a different set of tools, a different set of constraints. Maybe you're working with different protocols or different concepts, but I think most of those jobs remain and maybe even increase. On the engineering side, right, so do we still have to build networks? I think calibrating the intent matters here, right? So if you've got this amazing system that allows you to tell it your intention and execute that, well, someone has to decide what it means if, a developer says they need to connect these two data centers together to run this application. Well, how does that actually work, right? And so yes, once you push that button, it all just happens, but somebody has to tell it what to do to make all that happen. Capacity planning, I think, still becomes an issue. Testing the functionality of the new design, when you put these things in place, right, when you're first building a network, even if it's an automated network, maybe especially if it's an automated network, there's a lot of testing that's going to go into this. And then maybe instead of taking the architect's design and implementing it through CLI code, you're going to implement it through APIs and Python or something else. So I think the impact here is less mop, more code, right? So instead of writing out instructions of the CLI for operations staff or lower tier engineers to fill out, you're going to be writing codes and scripts yourself to execute on these things and to actually have the network build. So the next thing, troubleshooting, right? So the big operations job, which is, what do we do when the network breaks? We're going to have more advanced monitoring tools. We already do. Potentially, as I talked about earlier, when you've got information coming out of the network and the ability for scripts to put information into the network, maybe you have autonomous remediation, right? Maybe simple things can be fixed on their own. You don't have to touch them. I think there still is complex failures, especially in these systems, right? Again, abstraction is not removing complexity, it's hiding it. And so there's definitely still things where you have to bring in somebody who can really fix these problems. And so software systems will be deeply integrated. I think these jobs will become easier. So there may be a reduced headcount in the areas of operations and troubleshooting, right? I mean, this is an area where I think you may be replaced by a script. Provisioning services, I think this is where the biggest impact is going to happen. Once you get portals and APIs, pre-built scripts, templated configurations, this intent-based policy control, right? All these things that the architects and the engineers have built is supposed to just work. And so, really your provisioning department is one thing where you might be able to actually really save on OpEx and have scripts do this work for you. I think that should be probably essentially eliminated or will be. And then the help desk, the first thought is, well, if somebody has to answer the phone, right? I don't know. When I get up in the morning, I ask Alexa what the weather's going to be like. And she tells me. So, do I have to, when I call somebody and say the network's not down, does that have to be a human on the other line? I don't know. And again, don't forget those portals and APIs. So even if it's not a voice interface, if I can just open a ticket and the ticket solves itself, how much help desk is needed? Probably much, much less. So I think the conclusion, if there is one, is that if you're not replaced by a script, you will work with one, right? So your scripts will become your colleagues. And so then bringing that a little bit tighter, right? Can a script replace me or you? I think the things you have to think about is, are you working with people or are you working primarily in processes? Because processes can be automated. Processes are where scripts play. People, not so much. Repetition versus innovation. Are you doing new things? Are you working on challenging things? Are you deploying new technology? Or are you just doing the same thing over and over again? If you're doing the same thing over and over again, the script is probably not your friend. And then again, quantitative versus qualitative. And this is the same thing, right? So computers are really, really good at doing math, but they're not very good at figuring out emotion. And that's just one example, but qualitative decisions, gut instinct, gut feelings, if that's part of your day-to-day job, you're probably not going to be replaced by a script because you just can't be, at least not for a long time. Okay, so now what? What do we do now? My biggest concern, and this may be the grumpy old man in me, is I really worry about the net edge on-ramp. And what I mean is, for most of the folks that I work with, we first got jobs in networking on the help desk, answering trouble tickets. and figuring out how to fix stuff, right? And then we moved up and moved up through the tiers of networking. And so if you eliminate all those jobs, if you eliminate provisioning and you eliminate the help desk, well, then where do people learn networking? I don't know. Maybe it's that networking changes enough that we don't. You learn scripting and you learn these other things instead. I don't know. But that's my concern. I think the bigger picture is that this isn't a problem or a challenge that's just in our industry, right? Automation is everywhere. The robot agenda is absolutely on track. It's moving forward. And many people are talking about automation in many places. For example, Goldman Sachs in the last few years sacked 600 traders and replaced them with 200 IT pros and a bunch of scripts, right? Kevin Kelly has 7 stages of robot replacement that he talks about. The first stage is a robot could never do my job. There's no way. Second stage is, well, maybe it can do part of my job, but not all of it. And then, well, okay, it can do all my job, but when it breaks down, I have to fix it. And then, okay, it can do my whole job, but I have to teach it how to do new things. And then finally, the 5th stage is, they can do my whole job. That's a job that humans shouldn't have been doing in the first place. Which leads to the 6th stage, which is, great, my new job is so amazing. I'm so glad that a computer took over my old job. And the 7th stage is, I'm really glad that a robot can't do my job. You can see where that goes. The other thing I think is a kind of a gut check, right? What did you expect? The only constant is change. We work in technology. You got into networking probably because you were interested in changing and evolving technology. So the fact that it's changing and evolving shouldn't really be that alarming. You should expect to learn and grow. The fact that networking is maybe stagnated a little bit over the last decade or two in many ways, it shouldn't be too alarming that it's now finally kind of unstuck and things are changing and there's differences. The other side is, as much as we can create efficiency through scripting and automation, don't forget that the market is growing, right? More and more people are being connected, more and more devices are being connected, right? We talk about IoT, we talk about bandwidth growing via video, we talk about all these companies now are all of a sudden talking about going digital. I'm not sure exactly what that means because maybe it's throwing away fax machines. I thought we were all kind of digital already, but security is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, and there's more people, right? More people that are connected and more people in general. So the number of devices to the number of engineers is skewing really rapidly. And so if we need less engineers per device, but we're also adding more devices, does the number of jobs actually go down? I'm not sure. They probably change. So I think the real upside to all of this is that this really is just the beginning. You have a chance to be in the early stages of this whole new wave of a different way of doing networking, of a different way of approaching networks. Scripting and automation is also more efficient. The more efficient you are, the more money you can demand, right? If you can run a network of thousands of devices, it's probably a lot better than saying, oh, I can take care of one router. There's a really good talk from a friend of mine, Leslie Carr from NYNOG3. I put a link in here, What's Net DevOps, Why? That really kind of explains this space as far as, what is this idea of using automation within a network and why would you want to do it? Beyond that, I think there's a couple other places to start. These are also NANOG talks. They came from Facebook. There's a NetOps Coding 101 that's in 2 parts, and then a NetOps Coding 201. Those videos I really, really highly recommend them as places to go if you're just starting this journey and want to kind of get an idea of where to go. This link is kind of ridiculous, but I put together a YouTube channel of videos of automation. So you can either click on that link from the slide somewhere, or if you search for my name, Chris Grundemann on YouTube, you can find the channel. It's called Automation and DevOps and SDN. There's a bunch of videos there from talks all over the world that kind of dig into this. So if you're looking for what next, that's probably a place to start. There's a bunch more network resources. Napalm is really, really interesting. If you're interested in this space, I advise you to look into it. There's a link there for a very cool online tutorial of figuring out Napalm and how to use it. GitHub is another place now where a lot of scripts and programs are showing up. Python is a language that is becoming adopted pretty readily across the board. It's a very high level. It's almost common language. It's pretty easy to learn, and it's being used pretty widely. And something I think one of the kind of dirty secrets of software developers is that they don't do much new code. They fix a lot of old code. Stack Overflow is a great resource to go ask questions, and you can find snippets of code from people who have done the thing that you need to do, and you can hack it together, and you'll find that this actually isn't nearly as scary as it sounds. Before we part, Tim O'Reilly recently spoke at the Apricot conference in Asia, and these are some of the things. He had like 10 things about the coming wave of AI, and these were a few that really stuck out to me. He defined scripts as workers and developers as managers, and that kind of rang true to me. That what you're really doing is building a team underneath you, right? And that again goes back to that efficiency. Also, algorithms are power tools for our minds. So using these things, you can actually, again, you can increase your efficiency, you can increase your own power. And the physical and digital boundaries are blurring, right? You can use your phone to call a car. There's these weird things where you tap on a screen and things happen in real life. And so taking that over to the network space where maybe you can provision servers or provision new VLANs, and there's things you can do on your phone or on a screen that are actually happening in real life, and we're really just kind of automating these things. Again, that link is to his talk. Pretty interesting. So my best advice is to focus on the things that scripts can't do, right? Creativity, communication with other human beings, constantly learning, construing meaning, being intuitive and being innovative. And right now, I think it's not quite time to panic. So I have no idea how long that took. I may have time for questions or not. I know I had 36 slides in 30 minutes, but
plenty of time for questions.
Really fast, perfect. Are there any questions or discussion or anything before we're going? Absolutely. I assume NYNOG will put them up. I'll also put them up on SlideShare, so they will be available, and there'll be links out for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So if you get to design like a network curriculum at a university, what's like the most important thing you would say people need to learn?
Yeah, see, so, and this may be the grumpy old man. I'm not sure that I've made the transition yet. But I still think networking fundamentals are very, very important. I think that one of the biggest flaws we've had in the network industry so far is that we've allowed vendors to define our curriculum through certifications, which have been fairly useful, but at the same time, like learning Junos or iOS or EOS or whatever OS doesn't necessarily teach you how spanning tree works or how BGP works. And I think understanding the fundamentals of how these protocols work and how computers actually talk to each other, what's in a packet, what's in a header, why is IP even a thing, I think those fundamentals still matter. And I think the more you understand, the more fundamentally you understand the basic concepts, the more elegant a solution you can provide. So I would say the basics are still important, but I think maybe adding on to those basics now is systems theory and programming languages, and maybe there's some extra pieces involved there where you actually need to be a computer scientist again, and not just a network engineer that happens to know the CLI really well. All right.
Anybody else? Okay. Can we have a big round of applause for Chris?
Thank you.